Liz, welcome to the Warrior School podcast.
Thanks, Amy. I'm so psyched to be here.
Well, we're going to sit down and we're going to have a chat. I have a little bit of coffee. What are you drinking?
A girl after my heart. I've got some water and some coffee myself.
Okay, great. I've also got water. Yeah. So we're just going to sit at the table and we're going to have a chat about you, about protein, about amino acids. Does that
I
sound
love it.
cool?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
get into it.
All right. So the way that I love to start, because I don't know you that well, and I want to get to know you a little bit better, you, your world, your mission, your work. Where I love to start a lot of my podcasts is this idea of the dots. So a long time ago, Steve Jobs did a commencement speech and he spoke about how you can never look forward, but you can always look back and connect your dots. So I want to start with what you do now and what your mission is. And then let's go back and connect some really big key dots, especially when it comes to your like health training and fitness journey that led you to do what you do today. Does that sound cool?
I love it. That's such a cool question, and my challenge will be to keep it tight. Um, I often think of my journey as like a zig and a zag, but you're totally right. In retrospect, it all makes sense, that trajectory. But I think probably the most succinct way I could describe my mission is simply to help people feel a little bit better today than they did yesterday. That's really the mission I'm on, particularly with women. And particularly now that I'm 46, with women who are navigating their midlife years. So, what does that mean as I look back? Well, I started out as a kid who loved sports and loved playing sports. So that sort of like innate interest in movement and fuel and recovery and sleep and all those things. It really began during my childhood. And I don't think I knew that at the time, but I was constantly tinkering and observing like why I felt better during some game days than others or why practice went well. And so, fast forward, as an adult after graduating from college, I took a little detour right after graduating into investment banking, which, is one of those outlier dots, but was actually quite a transformative moment because it forced me at a young age to get really clear about what I actually was passionate about, because I knew very quickly that it wasn't finance, although I continue to have an interest in business. Um, and so at age 24, through a lot of hard work, I was able to pivot out of that career track into editorial. And my first job in magazines was as a editorial assistant in the fitness department at Self Magazine. And yeah, I just sort of continued to work at brands and in roles that allowed me to learn more about health and nutrition and fitness and to continue to hone my writing and my storytelling capability and to just continue to be curious and listen to what women were confused about and overwhelmed by. And so I've held roles at all sorts of different brands. I worked at Self for several years. I went to Time Out Chicago while my husband was in graduate school and did a ton of freelancing for a lot of big health brands. I came back to New York and worked at Cosmopolitan, under a new editor in chief who was really passionate about building out health content for that brand. I took a pivot to the brand side as well. I worked for places like Canyon Ranch and I worked at SoulCycle, overseeing content and digital strategy. Then I went all in on digital. I was SVP of content at Well+Good. And that leads us to my most recent job where I was editor in chief of Women's Health, the US edition. And that was the role I had for 7 wonderful years. And then, well, bringing you up to speed, just starting at the top of 2025, I stepped out on my own, and just, took that leap of faith that, between my skill set and my experience, that leaving legacy media, I had the opportunity to reach more people, and to apply my knowledge and to leverage my network to really like scale what I'd been learning. So that brings us to right now, month 4 of Liz on her own.
Just the fourth month. It was literally this year, like the start of 2025.
Yes. Yep. It's brand spanking new.
Wild. How's it feeling?
You know, I'm glad we're talking now because if you'd asked me in January, I would say exhilarating because it certainly is. But it was also terrifying because since I've been 22 years old, I've like worked for a big corporation and, opened the door to an office building every weekday morning. So that was a big adjustment. I love collaborating with teams, and that's been, a huge thing that's lit me up throughout my professional career. So that's kind of my biggest challenge right now, or what I'm working on is I get to work with a lot of different teams. I'm doing consulting, but it's different than having that day-to-day same group you're always brainstorming with and working with. But I'm finding ways to build those connections and to get that energy. Um, and I've learned so much, Amy. That's the biggest thing. That was like a huge reason for me doing this. Not to say I was on autopilot in my previous life. I certainly wasn't, especially because media changes so much and so quickly. But I felt strongly that I had made the impact that I could make at that brand. I just led the team in completing a redesign, and um, I felt like there was more to learn and more to offer, and I have been blown away because that has been true beyond measure. So I have my sea legs more now. I will say that. But yeah, I'm more exhilarated than I am terrified.
What does day to day, week to week look like now for you in your life, in your world? I've been watching since we set up this conversation, and it's dynamic. I guess that's the best word I can use. That there's a lot of, and it's quite just the energy behind that dynamic and the movement and what's going on in your world is really attractive. It's really cool to see you in so many spaces, collaborating, connecting with so many people and women, especially in the female space. So yeah, tell us like what has this week been like for you?
Well, okay, today is Thursday, so a lot of it is maybe a little boring, just me at my laptop, tinkering, brainstorming for clients, working on content, researching, that sort of thing. But I do like to leave my little cocoon of my apartment, and I'm very lucky. I'm still getting invited to lots of events and doing lots of speaking. So one of the brands I work with is Alloy, a women's health telemedicine company. We had a big event on Monday night, and I moderated a panel, which was awesome. Just leading a conversation with the two co-founders, the lead physician, and a community manager, and then taking questions from the audience and connecting before and after with all of the guests. That doesn't happen every day, dressing up and taking the train into Manhattan from Brooklyn, but it happens pretty regularly. I might go to a press event where I get to do yoga and, try on a pair of leggings from a brand like I did with Lululemon. Um, and a lot of Zoom calls with the different teams that I'm working with. Um, so it's a mix. And then there's also my personal stuff, which is, going to the gym, ideally 5 mornings a week, snuggling my dog Willa, who will probably make a cameo at some point in between those Zooms. Um, every day looks a little different, as I'm sure yours do too.
Yeah, which is what I love about it, though, as well.
I
So
agree. Yeah.
you've shared a lot about the dots with your work, and I'm super interested to hear you as a woman, as a female. and coming through. We can go back as far as you want if you want, but I'm super fascinated with our relationship to our body and to training and to food. And I'd love to dig into your relationship with your body, training, food. Uh, and what are some of those key dots that have kind of led you into this? Because we have the work side, which obviously was health and wellness and training, but what about you as a human? What has that looked like over the past couple of decades? Because you turned 46 in April. And I know a really big message that you share is around really powerfully transitioning through, I guess, what we can call kind of like the second act, yeah, or the this idea of it's a bit of a reinvention, and it sounds like you've taken that within the work business side of things. But I'd be interested to hear on a more personal level, what's that? Yeah, what's that looked like, that relationship?
For sure. And I think I'll start by saying that I've been doing a lot of introspection about that and looking back. Because what I failed to mention is that as part of this new chapter, I also launched a Substack called Best Case Scenario, where I write about this a lot, those pivotal moments and things that I've learned over the decades. So that's been fun. And if anyone's interested, you could go read more about my musings and reflections. Um, but I would say, as a 20 something, I got really, really into marathon running, which is nothing that I expected to happen because running was sort of the like thing I hated most about training for sports as a kid. I played soccer, tennis, and basketball growing up. And I mean, I remember when in soccer, the coach would have us run like 3 miles. And I just was like, are you kidding me? What? So to go from that to like joyfully training for marathons, and now I've done 10 of them, it just shows, in terms of reinvention that you like never know what you're going to fall in love with and what's in front of you. But I mentioned that because for many years, running was like my thing. I was running, again, it's funny, 3 miles felt like a lot. As recently as my late 30s, I was running like 6+ miles, 4 to 5 mornings a week. I would meet a couple girlfriends in the park very early. And that really shifted. Right before the pandemic began, I had a bad skiing accident where I was skiing way too fast and took a really bad fall and broke my sacrum. Um, yes. And if you've ever had that injury, then there's not much you can do with a broken sacrum except wait for it to heal because you can't like wear a cast or get a surgery. You just have to be patient. And you certainly cannot run on it because of the impact. So that was tough because fitness has always been something that powers me up and makes me feel good. It's my clarity, my confidence, my calm. And I had to find other tools and ways to, calibrate and center myself without running myself literally into the ground. But it was through that process and working over Zoom with a physical therapist that I was slowly able to add in strength training, which was always something happening in the background, but not super strategically. Um, and for the first time in my life, it was how long ago was the pandemic? 5 years ago. So this is my early 40s. I finally learned how to get that lit up endorphin high feeling from something that wasn't running in my adult life. And part of it was, doing it safely, being cued by the physical therapist, learning how to do that for myself, and then having the confidence to be able to pick up heavier weights. And that was incredibly transformative for me because I also watched my body change and I felt like I wasn't as exhausted and sore like I always had been from running. And I saw that I could get an awesome workout and feel really good without having to be out on the road for more than an hour. And that took me down a new rabbit hole, which was my nutrition. And just made me really curious about these things that had always been sort of bubbling in the back of my head. Like, well, what would it look like if I tweaked my diet? And, what if I started to prioritize protein? How would that change? So all of these moments that were like self-discoveries, because I'm a journalist, I think I don't just, Google it and let it be. I go deep and I talk to experts and I listen to podcasts like yours and I get on Google Scholar and PubMed and look at the research. And it just opened my eyes to all of this incredible science on things like nutrition, amino acids, creatine, supplements, that I then started experimenting with in my own body. And I am, obviously not a scientist or a PhD, but I am a certified personal trainer. I have my nutrition coaching degree. That combined with actually like talking to the experts who have devoted their careers to these pursuits just taught me so much and became really a springboard, especially when I was at Women's Health, for sharing what I was learning with other women. Because I just, like I said at the beginning, I want other people to feel better today than they did yesterday. I want to help them. And a lot of the information out there between social media and other platforms, it's so overwhelming. People are so confused. And so I try to be somebody who can curate that information and just serve up the good stuff.
Yeah, I'm super fascinated when you were going through this and you were still working at Women's Health. How was that? Because if we think about like 5 years or so ago, that's kind of when women's health and fitness and a lot of this stuff around perimenopause and transitioning into menopause that really started to gain momentum and get highlighted and spoken about, and it started to get pretty noisy. I guess over the last few years, I'd be interested. How did that get received? What was it like when you started to kind of pull that information from your own experience, but then also in your role into women's health? Because if we think you were kind of, I don't want to say like on the forefront, but just before, I would say in the last couple of years, it's super saturated, like you said, very noisy, very confusing. But talk to me about like trying to bring this new information, this new data, this voice into, a magazine that's it has status and it has power to influence a lot of women. I'd love to just hear, yeah, your experience and reflection on that.
Well, it's interesting as an editor because, especially in this day and age, we definitely considered ourselves a digital first brand, even though Women's Health still has a print publication. And I think there's a really important balance between looking at the data and metrics and understanding like what are women clicking on, which articles were they spending the most time with and engaging with, and giving them more of that, right? Making sure that you're fulfilling that void and helping them understand topics they're curious about, and then also being thought leaders and trailblazers and telling them what types of things they should be considering and should be interested in. So when you talk about something like menopause, I mean, I do think we were trailblazers. We were doing massive packages like from the beginning of my tenure 7 years ago. And if I'm being honest, people weren't like clicking on it and spending time with it, and that can be frustrating when you're like, oh, this is good science
Yeah,
and
it's
you
too
need
ahead
to
of the
know this.
game. Yeah, just like too
Please
ahead. Yeah.
listen. Right. And I'm not trying to like pat us on the back, but I think there's probably a lot of people in the wellness space who feel that way, that like they were ahead of their time and it wasn't working. Right. So Women's Health continues to do a ton of perimenopause and menopause content. And now, whoo, it is lit. Everyone's reading it, and sort of the challenge is more like how to stand out and have a point of view and add to that conversation when so many are happening. In terms of strength training, I mean, the first thing that we worked on as a team was just being super intentional with our language. I was raised in a media landscape where I was working on stories with headlines and cover lines that were like, how to lose 10 pounds in 2 weeks and how to get more toned. And there's nothing wrong with weight loss. I continue to believe that. It might be a controversial opinion, certainly was for some years. I don't think anyone needs to lose weight, but I would rather be the brand that offers science-backed, evidence-based information to help them if they would, medically benefit from a different body composition or even just emotionally and mentally feel more at home in their body if they lost a few pounds. But I think words are really important. And I think finding different ways to talk about preserving and building lean muscle mass. I don't think toning was necessarily the best choice of words, though it was arguably the ones that women most identified with or wanted to hear because they were fearful of becoming too bulky or big. Um, strength probably became our most used word at the brand. And we had a copy editor who would make a list of reps every month in the magazine. And, every month it was like, guys, you gotta pull back on strength. So finding different ways of saying that and visuals that told that story in a really like inclusive and empowering way. Um, I'll now transition to protein, which was another thing that here's my dog Willa, who I told you about. Um, Protein is another topic that I think you're right. We were like just ahead of this protein obsession and craze, which so many brands are now saying is like overhyped. Um, Again, that was something that I personally had felt such an impact on my life and my energy, my sleep, how I felt, how I looked that I knew women needed to know more about it. And I grew up in the 80s where, protein and fat were sort of demonized and it was all about low calorie this and, 1200 calorie diets, et cetera. And I really wanted to flip the script on that. So it was cool watching the change in our readership and watching people respond more to that and want more information. We launched like a protein playbook. Women's Health just published a book all about protein. So, it's a little chicken and egg. Like, were we part of the spark that made this, a big conversation in the women's space, or were we just there like right before it was bound to happen anyway? I will never know, but I'm really proud that our brand was reporting and publishing those stories before it was cool to do so.
Yeah, tell me about your fueling strategy and how that's changed. As you said, when you got into strength training, you really looked at your nutrition and how you fuel yourself, and protein was a really big focus. Talk to me about like, okay, what were you researching? What were you learning? What did you pull in? What did you notice as, a really big difference? Because I know that you do, you talk about this a lot through your own work, and then through brands that you work with. One we'll talk about today when we chat about amino acids. But yeah, talk to me about how your fueling strategies changed, and then how you fuel yourself now as like a 46-year-old woman.
Yeah. So I would say it was about 3 years ago that I got super curious about how much protein I was eating. And yeah, I had a friend who's also a trainer. She leads a group of people, thousands of us, who do kettlebells on an app called Ladder. And she often talked about protein and she would text me about it and ask me like how much protein I was having. And I had even edited stories about protein. I knew how important the macronutrient is. I think sometimes you have to hear it, said just right or from just the right source or just the right moment in your life for something to click. And I, for whatever reason, was like cracked open and really ready to hear it. And I started by looking at, okay, Liz, like how much protein are you having in a given day? Not changing my diet, just observing. And Amy, I was only having like 40 to 50 grams of protein,
No.
which, by the way, is what the RDA in the state says is a perfectly healthy threshold. That's what they recommend. But the more I looked into it, the more I realized, well, that's based on like a 25-year-old study that was done on men. And it was actually a study that had nothing to do with whether or not these men were thriving or healthy, but like, were they staying alive? What was the nitrogen balance in their body? How are they metabolizing it? And that sort of blew my mind because when you actually looked at the research, scientists who had devoted their lives to studying this macronutrient said we actually need way more than that. particularly somebody who was as active as I was, working out 5 or 6 days a week, and particularly as a woman who had crossed the threshold of 40. And as we know, with each decade older we get, starting at around 35 to 40, we begin losing 3 to 8% of our lean muscle mass due to fluctuations in hormones, particularly the deceleration of how much estrogen our body produces. So that's where I started. And after that shock and awe over how little I was having, um, my next step was the second week where I was like, okay, let's start like reading nutrition labels and like, Googling how much protein is in a chicken breast. I'm somebody who I'm not vegan or vegetarian. I do eat plant sources of protein. And so that was just sort of like a discovery phase of getting clear on, okay, how does one do this? And I had learned that for somebody my age and activity level, I needed at least 100 grams of protein a day. And given how active I was, actually about 125 to 135 grams was the sweet spot for me, which is 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. So that's a lot of protein. If you go from 40 to that, anybody who's been through this knows you're kind of like, I have to eat what? How much? And so that was week three, was like, let's just get to 100 and see how it goes. How can I build 100 grams of protein into my day? And really, week three was when the magic happened because I kid you not, and I don't think anything in health is a magic bullet, but this was quite dramatic for me. And you're nodding, so you've, I assume, been through your own protein journey, as I call it. But like, I just started to feel so much better, Amy. I didn't feel snacky throughout the day. I didn't feel compelled to like finish my kids' dinner plates. I just felt like this sustained source of energy all day long. And I think it's okay to talk about this. I noticed that like I had more muscle definition at the gym, when I would like look at my reflection in the mirror. It finally, for the first time in my life, it looked like I was working as hard at the gym as I actually was, which was motivating. Um, so that's kind of how it all began. And then, these days I've been really sticking to it ever since. I continue to eat protein forward. I have at least 30 grams of protein in each meal. That's the amount that experts say you need to have in one feeding, which is a really weird way of saying in a meal to activate protein synthesis. Um, I should be clear. I also like live my life. I have gone through phases where I've been so regimented and militant about it that I sort of drove myself and probably my family crazy. And I've landed now at 46, I think, in a really healthy place of prioritizing protein, choosing to eat protein forward, but also not sweating it if, occasionally while traveling or when my husband makes a wonderful pasta dinner, I'm not getting 30 grams of protein in that meal. It's okay because most of the time I am.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating because we have the research and the researchers, that come up with terms like feeding. That's very much a
Exactly.
researcher's term. Yeah, that's like in the lab of feeding. Um, so we have the research and the researchers, and it's amazing. Yeah, there's really cool research and women that have done really great work in this space over the last several years. But and then we have this, we can use tools like tracking and, chronometer and stuff to learn about nutrition. And I do believe because we weren't taught this stuff in school. Yeah, we weren't taught, how to feed ourselves and, about nutrition and about protein. And so I do believe that spending some time diving into something like, becoming aware of your eating habits and behaviors and doing some tracking and understanding how much protein is in a certain amount of food is we need to educate ourselves. And that knowledge, the saying like knowledge is power, but I think that action is really gives us power. But then there's the next piece of it, I think, though, that we're being told to do all of this stuff, but we need to learn how to integrate it for ourselves. And so that's when it's like, okay, well, let's learn the tracking and our eating behaviors and our habits and what we are doing. And then let's build a strategy like you did to slowly increase to get to this place of eating, as much protein as you need to eat to support your body and your physiology. Um, but then there needs to be like fluidity within that and flexibility, and you need to create your own strategy. And I think what women are struggling with a little bit right now is that they're being told to do all of this stuff, kind of like there's this list of stuff to like check off, but it's actually practicing it and trying to live it and integrate it and just being patient with ourselves to like, okay, well, we will work it out like you did. Yeah, you'll get to this place that feels really good for you. You have a better understanding of protein and how much your body needs and how to eat and, how much protein's in something. But then you've brought in this idea of like, flexibility and fluidity. And I think that just comes from experience and understanding and building trust with your body and knowing that you're giving her what she needs for. Yeah, I don't know what you think about that, but I think that's kind of what I'm seeing happening right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I love that word flexibility because I think that's the key to making it sustainable and long term. And you can apply that to other healthy things we do, like going to the gym, right? Like, yes, ideally you're doing your 4 days of strength training every week and 2 days of sprints and, blah, blah, blah. But like every week doesn't have to be perfect for it to work. Every day doesn't even have to be perfect for it to work. And even with the like me, looking at labels and that week of like weighing different things and using Google or trackers. Like, to be clear, I don't do any of that anymore. It becomes just part of um, your habits and your rituals, and you start to be able very quickly to eyeball things. Like, I can look at 3 hard-boiled eggs and immediately be like, okay, 6 grams protein per, that's blah blah. And so it it doesn't have to take all that time and effort. It just takes a little bit on the front end, and then you start experimenting and you find a way to like build it into your life that feels sustainable and doesn't make you crazy.
Yeah, for women listening, we're being told to eat more protein because it's going to help with our muscle mass and help prevent potentially, the decline in muscle mass. But just talk about what are the other benefits? Like why would we be focusing our energy and our time, which is very limited in our big busy lives, on trying to go from, because a lot of women probably very similar to yourself, Liz, 40, 50 grams of protein, 60, maybe hovering around that 80, 90. But why would we focus on increasing it to that what our body needs? Maybe it's like that 120, 125, 130, other than for our muscle mass. Like what is it doing for us?
Yeah. So, okay, let's start with muscle and go a tiny bit deeper on that. And I'm going to tell you why. Muscle is where it is like this powerhouse in your body where you store your amino acids, and your body uses those building blocks in order to activate protein synthesis in the body. So, little known fact, when you're eating protein, and I think people get confused about this or don't really realizing it. What your body is actually doing is taking that protein source and grabbing the essential amino acids from it and using it to activate protein synthesis in your body. So, why do you need protein synthesis? Well, yes, it fuels more muscle, it fuels the preservation and building of muscle, but it does so many other things in your body. For starters, it keeps your brain healthy. It makes you sharper. It keeps your neurons healthy. It keeps your immune system healthy. It bolsters it. It keeps your heart and lungs and other organs healthy. It's fueling your gut and helping relieve inflammation. I mean, it's keeping your hair shiny, your nails stronger. So the list just goes on and on. Your body literally needs protein synthesis in order to do everything it has to do. It needs it to sleep and to recharge and help you recover overnight. So, when we talk about how our muscle mass declines, particularly for women when they reach midlife, there's a big word that gets thrown around, sarcopenia, which is the age-related loss of muscle. And that is a problem, not only, aesthetically and how you look and feel, but because your body depends on muscle, that's where it's going to go. It's going to get those aminos one way or another to do protein synthesis. So it's incredibly important as we get older to fuel ourselves properly, to continue to give our bodies protein. And every year this gets more important. It needs it to order in order to stay healthy, to prevent medical conditions, to prevent brain decline, to help bolster you against anxiety and depression. So it's not just like a cool, nice to have thing. It's not just about like your flex in the mirror. It's really essential to being energetic and to being healthy for as many years as possible.
Yeah, let's talk about what an amino acid is, I think, because, and what they do and what they really have to do with protein. Let's kind of go back to basics. I know some women out there listening have potentially heard some of this stuff and it's spoken about, but I think, yeah, I'd like to kind of bring it back to, okay, well, what is an amino acid and what does it do? And what do they have to do with actually physically eating the protein in our meal?
Yeah, for sure. So there are 20 amino acids, and we can get those from all sorts of sources. Interestingly, there are nine that are called the essential amino acids that your body cannot make on its own. So you have to get it from an external source. So you need those in order to activate protein synthesis in your body. So this is particularly important for vegans and vegetarians because many plant-based sources of protein do not contain all nine of the essential amino acids. Now, to be clear, you can totally get them all. You just might have to pair a couple of different sources together, and you just need to be more strategic about it. Animal sources of protein like fish and lean meats tend to have all nine of them. So, when we're talking about protein, we're really talking about amino acids. And actually, we're really talking about the essential amino acids that your body needs to take in, take apart, and activate protein synthesis.
Yes. Okay.
I know. Dramatic pause. Let that sink in, everybody. So yeah, that's the magic behind this mysterious like macro and prioritizing protein. And I think where you might be going or where I would love to go, and this connects to what we were talking about with flexibility. Something that has helped me a lot is that there are some days when it's hard to get all of them in, right? Or maybe you only have a vegetarian option or a vegan option that doesn't have all nine of those essentials. I travel a lot. And even though I like to pack snacks, like I'm not going to bring hard-boiled eggs on the plane. I don't know what's going to be available in whatever airport I'm flying through. I don't like to bring hard-boiled eggs on the plane because I'm not going to be that person. I'm not going to be that passenger. I've had people break it out before and it's a bit much. Even I have my limits. And so there are things we can do to help us to fill those gaps, and to make sure that our body is just covered, that we've got an insurance policy, that we're getting all nine of those essential amino acids.
Give us an example of what
So,
that is.
so like this was part of my journey and my all of my research and all of the rabbit holes that I went down. I learned a lot about a supplement called essential amino acids. I don't take very many supplements. The only ones that I take are I use protein powder, which I kind of consider a supplement, which I'm happy to go into. I take creatine and I take essential amino acids. So, essential amino acids are, you can take it in powder or pill form, and they are formulated to have the exact ratio that your body needs to activate protein synthesis in your body. It has all nine of those EAAs that you have to get externally that your body's not going to produce and make on their own on its own. And it's in the exact right ratios, including just the right content of leucine, which is a branched chain amino acid you hear tons about it. It's one of the most famous, popular ones. So when you take an essential amino acid, I use a powder form. I use a brand called Keon, which I can talk about why, but I put it into a glass of ice water every single morning. I stir it in, and it is so cool because it's immediately bioavailable. My body, it hits my bloodstream and my body starts activating protein synthesis like bam. Now, what's cool about it is I mean, it's kind of magic in the sense that your body immediately begins using it, which is different than when your body's getting protein from a food source. Food is awesome. To be clear, I eat lots of food. I'm not suggesting we don't eat whole foods. They have micronutrients, vitamins, antioxidants, all sorts of good for you things. But it's actually kind of a slightly inefficient way to get amino acids because when you eat a meal, you tend to eat it with like some carbs, some fat. Like it's rare that you're just having, grilled fish all by itself. Which actually sounds really boring and sad, so I don't recommend that anyway. But what happens when we combine these macronutrients is our body just is less efficient at pulling out those aminos that it needs to activate protein synthesis. Again, totally fine, but especially as you're aging, we really want to prioritize that we're activating that protein synthesis and make sure that we do it every single day. So when you take an essential amino acid supplement, I like to say it's like my insurance policy. I just know I'm covered, that I'm doing that day. And I joke about I talked a little bit about my there was a period where I was like kind of obsessed, borderline obsessed with like making sure I got my 125 grams of protein. And I remember one night when my husband Matt, he's an economist, but he also happens to love to cook, so it makes me very lucky. He was making pasta for dinner, and I was kind of like, did you use chickpea pasta, which has more protein in it? What's our protein on it? And he's like, no, it's not chickpea pasta, and there's no protein on it. And I kid you not, Amy, I like went to the cupboard to look to see if we had a tin of tuna fish, which I was then like, okay, I could dump this on top, or I could just eat it right now, like right before I have the pasta dish. And that was a big moment for me of like, whoa, Liz, relax, like, no, I'm not going to ruin Matt's delicious dinner by throwing tuna fish on it. And I also don't want to be the girl who's like eating tuna fish before dinner. All to say, when you take something like an essential amino acid, you don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. I still prioritize protein. I still eat healthy. But this just like has my back. I'm covered.
Yeah, the way that I like to think about it, and I often talk about it, is and there's actually a study done by Holtzman and Ackerman, and they talked about this idea of the hierarchy of nutrition needs for female athletes. So what they were looking at was, okay, there has to be a hierarchy. Yeah, it's not we can't just like do it all, or what do we do with these female athletes? And is it the same? And so basically they came up with this like pyramid, which is like the food pyramid, but it was looking at, well, what's at the base? Like, what do we all need to do as women and as women, active women, women who train, and female athletes? Well, we all need to eat enough food. So we have to like fuel our body and eat enough so we're not in a low energy availability state. Drink enough water. And then the next is looking at the macronutrients. Okay, well, we need to, like you talking about, Liz, okay, how much protein do you need to eat for your body, your goals, your lifestyle, your recovery? So for you, it's like that 125, 130 grams. Okay, well, then you focus on that macronutrient. Then you kind of bring in the others around and have this like balance within them. And then they focused on like the micronutrients, like the vitamins and the minerals. Then from there, they were focusing on like nutrient timing around training. And here they started to look at, okay, well, what are some supplements that could be beneficial for women who train? And like two big ones, like you mentioned, creatine, so much research, really helpful for our training, our performance, our muscle. And then essential amino acids was another one. Then on top of that was like individualization. And I think
Mhm.
that's such a really cool, powerful way to visualize it. Like you said, it's a food forward approach where we're like we're trying to eat enough and balance our macros, eat those whole foods. Then where I want to speak to you about this idea of like nutrient timing
Mhm.
and when we would potentially use essential amino acids, because you said if we take them, well, they go straight into our system. And so when I hear you talking about that, I think, okay, well, that's good for training and for performance and like timing them around our training. So I'd love you to talk about that, like timing them around training, the benefits of having EEAs around our training when it could be strength training. I just started to sprint a year ago and I use them before I sprint. And so I'll sip on them during our warm up, which is like 50 minutes long. We have to warm up for a lot, especially when you get into your late 30s. You really
Uh-huh.
have to warm up for a long time. And so I'll sip on them and sip on creatine because sprinting uses phosphocreatine system, which is like creatine pretty much like straight away. And the amino acids go straight into my system. And so let's talk a little bit more about the meal timing and training and the science behind having something like an EEA around our training. Is that cool if we do that?
Totally. And you're like living the dream. You're doing it exactly right. And I too, I am not a spring chicken, so my warm-ups they get a little longer every year. Yeah, so as I said, I take it first thing in the morning with a glass of water, and sounds like you do too, right before your tough workout. That is ideal because you are about to exert your muscles. So they're like sponges, just like ready to utilize the EAAs. So I always tell people the best time to take it is when you're going to remember to take it. And you really only need to take it once a day, but I have leveled up. I take it multiple times through the day. The first time I take it is first thing in the morning. And I know that is ideal because I'm about to go strength train. I'm about to work my muscles. And so I'm getting like maximum protein synthesis payoff by pairing them in exactly that order. I then actually, so I have it first thing in the morning, and then I make a big water. I have my creatine then too. Then I make a big water bottle, a very big water bottle. Gosh, I don't even know how many ounces are in it. A lot.
I
And
wish
I
you
put
had it
in,
there so I could see
I
it.
should, I have it in the kitchen. It's like yay high. It's a big water bottle. Um, and then I put in 2 scoops and I fill it with water and I put ice in it. And kind of like you, I start sipping it on my walk to the gym, which is about a half a mile walk, and I sip it throughout my workout. There's really like no wrong way to do it, but it's like topping me off. I use a flavor. I love the watermelon and the mango flavors. It also just it's not like it's a meal or anything, but it feels energizing. It's like a nice, palatable, like, oh, I feel like I'm getting more energy as I'm sipping on it. And by the time I've completed my workout and finished my walk back home, I have drank that entire water bottle full. Then I have gotten to the point where if I'm like flagging in the afternoon or just need a boost, I don't do this every day, but some days I might make myself another one, just as like a mid-afternoon boost. And then I know some people that will even have another dose of aminos right before they go to bed at night because that is like the longest period we go in a 24-hour period for most of us. Most of us aren't getting up and eating in the middle of the night, though I have heard stories of bodybuilders who are really trying to optimize their protein synthesis, who will do some, very interesting things with their eating overnight. At any rate, and they'll have another dose before they go to bed to just fill up their reserves before they go into that fasted state overnight. So again, that now we're going pretty hardcore like biohacking optimization, and I don't want to freak anybody out there if they're feeling overwhelmed by this. To be very clear, if you have it every morning and ideally before you go work out, you are well ahead of the game and putting your body in an excellent position to be its healthiest self.
Yeah, okay, so I can hear women, they're like, okay, well, like how much? How much is too much? Like when should I take it? What brand? Before we get into all of the how, what, like part of it, I just want to talk about something that I think it's important. This, you're talking about protein synthesis and being able to synthesize protein. I just want to go a little bit deeper on that. And I want to link this idea of why we feed ourselves protein consistently over the entire day, almost thinking about it like drip feeding protein into our body. So you'll hear a lot of the experts talk about, spread it evenly across the day, have that serving within your meal, and then use something like EAs, like you're spreading them across the entire day. And I can just hear women just being like, well, like that's a lot. Like, why are you doing that? Like, what's the purpose here? Because for a lot of women, they're probably just linking it to like muscle mass. But I want to talk about why we don't want to go prolong, like with prolonged periods of time without actually getting that protein, which we really just mean the amino acids in our body. So it's not like we're obsessed with just piling chicken breast into you to get the protein. We're obsessed with getting the amino acids into the body to create protein synthesis, and we don't want you to be long periods of time without it. Can we just go into why
Yeah.
that's important?
Yeah, I'm really glad you're bringing that up because it can be confusing. And even, talking about those first few weeks where I was really deep, looking at my mo own protein intake and what the studies were saying. I'm glad we're talking about this because it took me a while to discover this on my own. But there's so many studies out there, and it's pretty much the gold standard at this point that you need at least 20, ideally 30 grams of protein to activate protein synthesis. So I it can I get it. Like people are going to be like, well, how many grams of protein are in an essential amino acid? And it's not like apples to apples because again, when we're eating a protein forward meal, what if you really want to be technical about it, what we're actually eating is the essential amino acids that are in that meal. So I think it's more helpful to think about like how much protein synthesis it's activating. And if you were having a mixed meal with various macronutrients versus essential amino acids, the essential amino acids are having at least 6 times the impact on protein synthesis than that mixed meal. So don't sweat the fact that you're not going to find X grams of protein on the back of the label. Um, and this is also interesting. Whey protein has about essential amino acids have about 3 times the protein synthesis power as whey protein. So just to keep things in perspective. Now, having said that, let's go back to that whole fixed mixed meal with, how most people typically eat. If you're having like, okay, I'm just gonna say like a big serving of a lean cut of meat, like steak or something. I guess that's not very lean, but we'll just say that for these purposes. Once you hit about 50 grams of protein, some people say 40 to 50 grams of protein, your body's like maxed out. It can't use any more. It can't pull any more essential amino acids from it, which is why there's really no point in like front loading in one meal and having like 125 grams at one meal. That would be a very big meal. But your body it's overwhelmed. It can't do what it needs to do with that volume of protein in one sitting. So you're exactly right, Amy. We need to spread it out over the course of the day. And if you're doing it through meals, I've had Dr. Gabrielle Lyon, who's a friend of mine and sort of one of the leading voices on this topic. She says, try to have your meal in about a 30-minute window. Try to, go for that like 25 to 50 grams. And then a few hours later, when it's time for your next meal, do the exact same thing. So we're like pulsing it throughout the day so their bodies can really optimize protein synthesis. And then to answer another question that you brought up, okay, well, what if I don't do that? What if I go all day long and don't have another meal rich in protein or I don't have essential amino acids. Okay, your body is going to activate protein synthesis one way or another. That's what we do to survive and to do all those things in our body, from our immune system to our brains to our organs, that it needs to do. So it will go into your muscles. It does always come back to your muscle. It will go in there, which is the site that we store amino acids, and it will suck them out. And I'm not saying this correctly. A scientist somewhere's head is probably exploding. I can't tell you exactly how the process works, but essentially your body will take them from your muscle and do that process anyway. And that is why your muscle mass will, that's one reason that it will suffer. So when we're building lean muscle mass, we're not just talking about like being strong and being more sculpted in our bodies. We're literally setting our bodies up to thrive so that it has the essential amino acids it needs to do all this protein synthesis so that our body can operate most efficiently. Did that did that help? Okay, cool.
Yes. Yeah. It was really beautiful and simple and clear. I think that it helps women just understand the why behind, again, I'm really focused on trying to connect the research and the being told what to do and move away from just like checking the box to understanding what's actually happening with the physiology. Like, why are we doing this? And so I think you explained it beautifully. The drip feeding approach that we actually can't absorb and use too much. So there's no point in just eating it all in a lump sum. And then if you're not eating enough and you're not spreading it, it's going to pull it from your muscles. And I like that language. It's simple. Yeah. Women, we don't need any more sciencey talk here. So I think that
Great.
that's,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah.
So the one other thing, I don't think I answered this question, but well, I started to, that how much is too much? Is there an upper limit specifically for EAAs? So again, to be clear, I am not a scientist. I know there has been research on this and there is an upper limit or a maximum. It is a very high number. You would have to do it like all day long to reach that maximum. And again, to your point, you don't need to for this to work. So, even if you're just having it once a day, ideally before you hit the gym or just first thing in the morning to get that process going and make sure you're covered, that is awesome. That is making a big impactful difference in your body. If you feel better, if you have it a couple more times spread out during the day, especially when you need a boost, awesome. That's great. But there's no reason to like chug essential amino acids all day long. Um, Having said that, I yeah, you would have to have so much in order for it to be like a problem that a doctor would be like, "Whoa, slow down."
Well, the body oxidizes it anyway. And so it's from memory. I haven't looked at the research for a little bit, but from memory, there's not like a toxicity limit like you have with like high dose vitamin C or anything. I don't believe there's like an actual toxicity upper limit because the body is just so clever at just actually oxidizing it and getting rid of it. And so I think it's, yeah.
Yeah. It would more be like, okay, your body can't use any more of this, so why are you making another water bottle of it?
Yeah, yeah. So, what you're saying when you remember, one is a great time, but morning time or prior to your workout, prior to your actual training session, because then the body's just going to be able to utilize them straight away and do protein synthesis, which is what we want. And one of the reasons why we're training is to build muscle, and to build muscle, we need protein synthesis. So we take them before training.
Bingo, well said.
Okay. All right. I'm really curious why Keon? Because a lot of women ask like what brand do you use? Like what's the best one? Like why do you use that? Why is it so good? What's in it? And so I'd love just to talk about, yeah, what do you use? Why you use them? What's in it? What makes it so good?
Yeah. So Kiana's the one I've been using personally for a few years, and As you mentioned, in a happy twist of fate in this new chapter that I'm on post Legacy Media, I am really proud that I actually get to be an advisor to Keon, and particularly to give them insight into, women and how women are thinking, particularly women in midlife. So that is a relationship that really was built very organically. Um, Kion is the supplement brand I use, and as you can imagine, as an editor, I've tried all of them. I've talked to all the teams. And also, to be clear, there are some really great brands out there. The first thing I would say to anybody considering any supplement, but also an EAA supplement, is make sure that it's third party tested. So that's when literally a third party, an objective outsider, checks to make sure that the formula contains what it says it contains. If you don't have that third party testing, the reality is you cannot be sure that they're putting in that bottle what they say they are. Um, Keon's also has no additives. So some people will ask me, and people, I've seen this with creatine, like there might be caffeine put in it or a pre-workout mixture, things like that. I'm not even gonna go there with that. I personally believe you should just have it straight up exactly what it is. No other additives is the way to go. Keatines has no other additives, no contaminants, no mold. So it's just like very clean, well-sourced, excellent gold standard product. So that's my story with Keon. I met Angelo Keeley, who's the CEO, years back when I was at Women's Health, and we got coffee together. And he was like, it was the right place at the right time because I was really, as I said, kind of cracked open and learning more about nutrition and my body and how it related to training and injury, energy and sleep. And that's when I started taking Keon and really noticed the difference. It also just tastes really good. They have all sorts of flavors. They have mixed berry, lemon lime, mango, and watermelon. My favorites are watermelon and mango. My husband, who's also 46, he takes it every day as well. So we're a Keon family. We really believe in their products. And this is neither here nor there, but for anybody listening, they're also just like a very kind team who passionately believes in it. They don't make like a whole medicine cabinet of supplements. Again, nothing wrong with that, but they've like devoted themselves and their research to these supplements that they know really work, that there's so much evidence work.
Yeah, I really appreciate the depth that they go to, or a depth that a brand or company goes to make to make the product better, or to bring someone like yourself on to make the connection with women better, because there's so much stuff out there. It's like, okay, well, how can we go deeper? Yeah, deeper into the story, deeper into the why, deeper into the connection. I think they do that really well, I would say. And it definitely helps when you don't go out there and make a million products that you think, okay, well, what are some of the really key products that are really going to help women, help their training, their performance, their recovery. And then let's like go deeper on those, make them better, tell a powerful story around it, and bring on people to help, yeah, educate and connect that, I guess, kind of research piece into the product piece and the brand piece. And they do that really beautifully. So
Yeah, this has come up a couple of times, and I get DM'd this on Instagram a lot, and there are a lot of comments about this. I wrote a very lengthy deep dive about EAAs and a different one about creatine, but I often get asked about BCAAs. Branched chain amino acid supplements are super super popular, super trendy. Probably listeners have heard, wellness influencers talk about them. So I think that's a great example of the integrity of a brand like Keon. They actually don't sell a BCAA supplement. And they could probably make a lot of money on it because it's such a buzzy supplement. But the reason they don't, and again, branched chain amino acids, those are awesome. They're great. The problem is, if you just take branched chain amino acids on their own, you can't activate protein synthesis. You need the other six, nine essential amino acids. So I always tell people, gently but firmly, it's just not a good use of your money. If you want to activate muscle protein synthesis, like get the real thing, get EAAs.
Yeah, get the real thing. Yeah. And I think you just said it, but to make it clear for women listening, what's the difference between a BCAA and an EAA?
So, so think of EAAs as like the umbrella. There are 9 of them, and then there are 3 branch chain amino acids that are essential amino acids, but you need all 9 of them to activate protein synthesis. So if you're only having a few, you can't do it.
Beautiful. We don't even need to go any deeper than that.
Okay.
Liz, is there anything else that you want to bring to the table for this chat and conversation around protein, amino acids, training, performance, especially at this phase, like in your life and women's lives?
Yeah, I think like one last thing that maybe didn't come up is, and this is something I'm really interested in with the various brands I'm consulting with, but it even came up in that panel that I told you about that I moderated on Monday night. For women who are in midlife, weight gain can be such a struggle. And I think, we've been taught and we still hear from our doctors, well, you just need to eat less and move more. And to be very clear, those lifestyle habits are incredibly important. And I would say they are baseline for everybody is to be thoughtful about your nutrition and also make sure you're moving. However, there's some factors outside of our control, right? As our hormones fluctuate and change and just the natural aging process. We can't activate protein synthesis as efficiently as we did when we were in our 20s and 30s. It's just, I didn't make the rules and I'm sorry, I wouldn't have made them this way. But as women, things change as we get older. So, number one, I would say keep that in mind that we're not, I'm not just, I don't say the word midlife or bring up my age willy-nilly. It's because it really matters to this demographic. And it matters every year and every decade older we get. So it's even more important for like Amy, you know, people our parents' age or our friends' parents' age, people in their 60s and 70s. That's like a population I really want to talk to too. And then in addition to that, on the note of weight care, weight maintenance, body composition, we kind of started talking about that. But I think a struggle a lot of people have is they hear this number like, okay, get ideally at least 100 grams of protein a day. Well, if you're doing that and you start adding up the calories, that can be a lot, right? Like some people might have to add another meal to do that. So if you're trying to work on your body composition and come to a body composition that you and your doctor think is right for you to, decrease inflammation and to lower your risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, other things that happen as we age. But then you're also upping your protein and like changing your caloric intake. Those things can sometimes be at odds, which is another place where an EAA supplement can be valuable because EAAs, they're not high in calories. They don't even have a calorie count on them. We don't really talk about a calorie count, but it's minimal, it's tiny. So you can activate that protein synthesis and get all those health benefits, and help maintain or lose weight should you need to without the struggle of like, okay, well, I need to get all this protein. How do I do that without adding more calories? So, not to, open a whole can of worms there, but it's something I'm asked about a lot. And I think that a lot of women are struggling with as they navigate these years of really wanting to feel at home in their bodies, not really understanding why the things that always worked for them no longer work for them. And, a lot of those things, they're like a lot of it is not our fault. It's just what happens to our bodies as they get older. But fortunately, there are tools and ways that aren't even hard, that are pretty simple, that are quite simple to help you navigate that and to feel at home and healthy in your body.
Yeah, when you're talking, what I'm hearing is that, there's this there's two kind of focal points here, I think. We have the natural process of aging and the change in the body and the body composition and the loss of muscle. And then we have the changing ratios of hormones, which then we see we start to, increase that decline in muscle and our bones and stuff. And so we want to focus on it from that perspective and side of things. But then we do have the aesthetic side of things, which is, there is nothing wrong with wanting to change your body composition. Yeah, you can respect your body and nourish it and work on your physiology in this side and still want to change your body composition because it's your body. And you want to feel and look the most comfortable that you can in your life. So then we have this other side. I think this is what women are really struggling with, the changes that they're going through. Their body feels foreign and it looks foreign and they don't understand because what they were doing is no longer working. And this is why I think they marry together so beautifully. It's like, okay, well, we've got more science now, more attention, more awareness, more research, more education, more understanding of like, this is why we're going on about protein. Yeah. Not only for your muscles and aging, but also it's going to play into this body composition side of things. This is why we're talking about strength training. And I think you said that really nicely. And I think that ties it up really beautifully is that because the body composition piece is a huge piece for women. And from a health perspective, but also from just a pure aesthetics perspective. There's nothing wrong with wanting to reach a peak hotness. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of.
Amen. Yeah, I think like your emotional and mental health are completely intertwined with your physical health. And I think you nailed it. They're not like mutually exclusive. That's the beautiful thing is that they can inform and help one another.
Yeah. Okay, Liz, what's on for, is there anything cool coming up in your world over the next couple of months? Like, where can people find you? You've written a book. Where can they get your book? Where can they go deeper into your world?
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, I overshare on Instagram, so come check me out there. That is my handle is Liz Plosser, Lizplossser. If you want to read my Substack, which if you like Amy's pod, I think you probably would enjoy my Substack too. It's called Best Case Scenario. You can access it at lizplosser.substack.com. I have a book called Own Your Morning that you can get on Amazon in paperback or hardback. And then if you are confused and I just said too many things, just go to my website, lizplosser.com, and you can find me in all the places there.
It was an absolute pleasure to have you at the table and in the room and have this conversation with you.
Same, Amy. I loved it. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you.